Loves here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a fun exercise that you are going to do that will improve your knowledge of intervals, especially melodic intervals, and this is like, it'll make the information a lot more personal. So I'm going to ask you to compose 5 8-bar melodies, and I would like you to use at least 3 keys, meaning I want you to use different sets of notes. If you don't know what keys are, because when you're at the beginning, you know, you got to pull some sort of tricks to get past stuff you don't know. So if you don't know what those are, I want you to just go over to the key signatures and just slap a key signature down. Try to stay in, like, maybe go up to 3 sharps and 3 flats as your range. A lot of you will probably pick to start in C major. That's fine. But just write in use different notes. And the goal here is not to be all technical and say which note you want to write. No, the goal here is I want you to come up with a combination of notes and writing out the rhythm. I'm expecting you to be a little bit comfortable with rhythms. Come up with an 8-bar melody, meaning use 8 measures to write this melody, and write something that you think sounds cool, that really appeals to you. And I will set a rule on this. You can stay in one clef. I don't care which clef you use. I chose to stay in treble clef. And the rule is it must be something that you could feasibly play. If you're not a piano player, it better be something that your friend could play. Don't be writing crazy freaking mumbo jumbo, like a D and then like a crazy note up here and then a note over here. That's something that tends to happen with computer written music because people can just write it and the computer will play it for you. Does not count. I want it to make sense, something you could play, and I want it to be a melody that you could at least listen to and be like, yeah, that's a melody. That sounds like a melody. So here's like an example of a melody. I chose to write in D major. We haven't talked about keys yet. I don't expect you to know. I just want you to use different sets of notes. And when I started out, I knew so little that I would just put notes down until I got something that sounded cool. I will give you a little bit of help on like maybe ways you can make more interesting melodies using rests, because that's something that once it's pointed out, it can really just help a ton. But here's like my first melody, right? It's 8 bars. And you see I performed a little analysis. So this is going to be the part that this will just help you a ton when you're starting out. So here's my first melody. So there you go. First melody. It sounds like a melody. You're like, oh yeah, something happened there. And now of course, I'm more advanced, so I kind of have the jump on stuff like this, so I can do things like this pretty fast. But when you're new, something like this can take a long time. I know. It's kind of funny. It took me like a month or something to write my first duet that I was like, yeah, this sounds like a thing. And I didn't know any theory at the time. I was just doing notes and using what little I knew about intervals to try and make things sound cool. So as you could see yourself playing that. Like if this was a melody you really liked, you could eventually sit down at a piano and figure out how to play this. So this fits well into the range. So I want you to write a melody, something like that. Now on the notes, we know that I'm expecting you to sort of know this, but we can break up the measure into beats. So beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that has to do with our time signature. So we have beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and then beat 4 is the rest. And so it's called syncopation. I talk about this in the rhythm series where you put a rest. It throws people off a little bit. It makes things compelling. If everything was on the beat, it would be a much less interesting melody. So try to use rest intelligently, like move things around. I also tried to do a variety of sort of different things you could do, because just as an example. So I'm going to play you through another melody and just show you another example of something I came up with. Now you'll notice that my measures are a little weird here. It looked really nice when I didn't have all the intervals written in, but as soon as I wrote them in, it began to look sort of ugly. But that's just how it goes. I could go through and fix it up so that it looks really nice, but I'm not gonna right now. This is just an example. So here is another example of a melody, and then we'll talk about a little bit about this melody, each one, and then we'll go over the analysis I'd like you to perform. So here is my melody 2, also in D major, so I stayed in the same key, but I used some different rhythms, you know. So there you go. There's another example of a melody, something that you could eventually learn how to do. On this one, I used triplets. So that's a rhythm thing. Rhythm is really, really important in writing good melodies. A lot of room. This would be something that we could easily develop. And so that's we just wrote something that sounds cool. You notice there's not like sharps or flats anywhere crazy. I stayed within the key. When you do that, when you stay within the notes that they've given you, or within the key, not some random being bestowed upon you, that is called being diatonic. And chromatic is when you use notes, any of the notes. So you say, fair game, all notes. And then you can have these like in-between states that are more modern ideas. So, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and look at another one. Now you notice really quick on this one that my rhythms, again, use this offbeat thing. So there's beat 2, but there's no note there. So it lets you know something else is supposed to happen. And so over here on the beats where I give a little push into the next bar. And so pretty cool. Some of these things could be accomplished through stylistic markings. That's sort of a composer to composer type deal. It gives off a vibe your music could carry with it. Here's one in F major. And you see this one, I have this little running pattern. So I thought that sounded cool. That was something I used to do all the time. I was like, hey, if I put every other note over, that sounds kind of cool, before I could like really read really good. So here is another example. This one is in F major. These are all 8 bars. So there you go. Simple little thing. You're like, hey, that sounds like melody. Here's one in E flat. Now I got a little crazier with the rhythm and the rests. I encourage you to do a little bit of exploration. These ones can take longer to write because there's just these tiny rests everywhere. We'll talk about barring conventions and stuff later. There's like all these rules about barring. I wasn't paying attention to any particular notation rules at the time I was writing this, but it's mostly there. So here is a different melody. You see, I used F for this one. And I did not use any offbeat stuff. On this one, I've got rests everywhere, so I'm, throwing those little surprises in for your brain. And I used a completely different key. I used the key V flat. And so let's go ahead and take a listen to this one. So that's pretty cool. Pretty nifty little thing, right? What you might notice is I don't repeat my first phrase. In many cases, you'll have this urge to repeat the first phrase again. Don't do it. Just because I want you to write new stuff. I want you to avoid being lazy at all costs. A lot of people grab that copy and paste button, and that's just not your friend right now. Don't use it. So write something that sort of makes sense to come after it. It might be a little hard because you have to come up with more original material where in your head you thought of a first few bars. So, come up with something else. And then finally, our last one. Now, this one starts in C major and it ends in G. So I moved into a different key just for fun. There's no rules we're sticking to really right here. We're not worrying about any technicalities. Later on, you'll worry a lot about them. But for now, we're just getting our feet wet. So here I wrote out another batch of notes that I thought sounded pretty neat together. So you see, that one sounds the least finished. There are reasons for this unfinished feeling, but we will not worry about that right now. I thought it sounded pretty neat, formed a little melody, and I recognize that that's a cool thing you might discover. I know why these things happened, but I didn't consider this. You may come across something that you're like, well, this sounds cool, but it just sounds not done. There's like this compelling feeling like something else should happen. You should take note of that. You'd be like, oh, wow, this is an important thing to recognize. And just move on. Don't worry. Don't sweat too much about it. As long as it sounds nice, you're good to go. We're not looking for anything crazy here. I'm not looking for crazy jazz rhythms. But you see, again, I tried to give another demo of sort of a different rhythm you could use. And this one I used the dotted rhythm. Very common sort of technique. So let's talk about this. So you're going to write out 5 melodies, right? Following some of these guidelines here. And they just need to sound nice and be something that you could theoretically, if you wanted to, you could sit down and learn to play them, even if you were like a beginner. So once you have this down, you are going to perform an analysis. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at the first note and you're going to look at the next note. And you're going to look at the interval. Whatever that interval is, you're going to write it down. So for example, now keep in mind, if you do use key signatures, this is an F sharp. It's not an F natural. So this is a major third. And then I said, okay, now I look at this note and the next note. What is the interval between them? And I'm like, oh, that's a minor second. And then we have a major second, a unison, a major second, a unison, because they're the same note. So that from here to here, they're the same. So it's a unison. And you're going to go through and you're going to write out the name of the interval. And again, you're going to want to hit Control K. That'll bring you up there. And then you can just hit your space bar and you can zoom on through your notes, right? And write in your intervals. So go ahead and do that. Write this out. It's a really fun exercise because you're just writing melodies, like arguably one of the most interesting aspects of music. However, there are entire philosophies that could disagree with that statement. But yeah, that is that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. If you want to share your result down below in the comments, maybe you just make a screen recording. Include if you're curious if you got your thing right. I'm not saying I'm going to go look over all your intervals, but maybe someone else will, because I've got a lot on my plate right now. So, but yeah, you could post it down below and then, just show the community what you made. It's always fun trying to see your progress. That was one thing that when I was learning, I was a lot younger. So every time I wrote anything, I would try and go and show someone, and usually it was the same people. So they got kind of tired of it. So it's nice to have a community that cares about like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like you're on your way, even though it might sound like complete trash right now. You're like working towards something. It's something you've never written. You've progressed. It's exciting. I have like gigabytes of garbage that I've done, and every now and then you'll get those shining moments, and eventually you'll get more until most stuff you write shining moments. Like in here, there's nothing like a horrible turd sitting around in here. This unfinished piece over there is like, slightly unpleasant, but that's just because we're just doing an exercise. We can finish it out and make it sound really nice. And then you can just make things sound unique and shiny at the same time. That's when you start you're like, oh, wow, this is actually sounding pretty cool. And you begin to have confidence in yourself, and away you go. So if you have any questions, let me know about this particular exercise. There's not a file for this, but I will include this example file just so you know what's coming up. It'll be like melody interval practice, whatever I named it. It should be aptly named. I think I'll number them to keep things a little organized. So the same number of the video, given that I don't change the numbers for some reason down the line. Support me on Patreon and have a blessed day.